She was the glamorous face of a new generation, an influencer whose beauty and ambition promised a future of endless opportunities. But in June 2023, Athena Liya vanished into thin air, leaving behind only fragments of her digital life and a storm of unanswered questions. From whispers of betrayal by a trusted friend to unconfirmed sightings in Cambodia's infamous casinos, her story cuts into the very heart of Southeast Asia's billion-dollar trafficking underworld. This is more than just a disappearance. It's a descent into a world few ever escape. Stay with us for the full story, and don't forget to subscribe. Athena Liya was a name that, for a brief moment, lit up the Chinese internet. Born Kong Limei, she carved out her space in the entertainment world as both an influencer and a beauty queen. By 2021, she had already claimed the spotlight as third runner-up at Miss World Macau, a title that boosted her recognition beyond the runway and into the world of social media. Her posts were polished, aspirational, and glamorous. She became a figure brands wanted to align with and followers wanted to emulate. It seemed like the beginning of a long, glittering career. But behind the curated images and viral clips, a far darker story was unfolding, one that would take her from luxury hotels and photo shoots to the shadows of Southeast Asia's criminal underworld. In early 2023, Athena was living the dream of a jet-set influencer. She uploaded content from Thailand, sharing snapshots of bustling street food markets, beaches, and nightlife. In March, her online footprint suddenly shifted, hinting at time spent in London. A video posted in April showed her strolling down streets that looked unmistakably European. On April 23rd, her birthday, her TikTok auto-updated with a status that felt impersonal, as if the system itself had generated it, rather than Athena manually typing it out. That detail, though small, would later be read as a sign that something was already amiss. The very last public post she ever made came on June 12th, 2023. It was nothing more than a casual picture at a cafe, an ordinary moment that, in hindsight, marked the end of her public life. Athena's silence after that cafe post did not immediately alarm fans. Influencers sometimes take short breaks, but for someone like her, whose career depended on constant visibility, a blackout that stretched on for days was unusual. Behind the scenes, however, events were already spiraling out of control. The trigger was a planned trip to the Philippines, and the details around it remain some of the most suspicious elements in the entire case. According to private chat records later leaked online, Athena had been urged to travel through Southeast Asia by her close friend known as Lee or Lee Ye. The plan was a lighthearted getaway, a chance to relax and gather new content. But on the very day Athena was scheduled to leave, Lee suddenly backed out, citing a family emergency. Athena was stunned. She sent messages questioning why her friend would cancel a trip that had been pitched as her own idea to begin with. Lee's response was vague. She reassured Athena that she would rebook flights and join later. By then, though, Athena had already committed to the journey. She boarded a flight from Guangzhou to Manila on June 16th. The plane touched down at 4:35 in the afternoon. At that moment, Athena was still just another young traveler arriving in a foreign capital. Within hours, she would become a ghost. The accounts of what happened next come from fragments, chat logs, screenshots, and whispers from people who claim to have been close to her. A man named Bing had supposedly been arranged to pick her up. Another figure, using the name Neo, appeared in online discussions, giving instructions for Athena's arrival. He directed her to Gate 7 at the Manila airport, where a driver would be waiting. He booked her into the presidential suite at the Solaire Resort, promising dinner that evening. These details, while precise, have never been officially confirmed, yet they form the backbone of the narrative that her friends and internet investigators have pieced together. From her very first day in the Philippines, Athena's behavior shifted dramatically. She began contacting people back home, asking to borrow money. At first, the amounts were small, but the requests grew and the reasons behind them never added up. For a woman who had built a thriving online presence and earned significant income from sponsorships, the sudden desperation for cash seemed out of character. Her explanations were inconsistent and confused, a red flag that something was seriously wrong. Around the same time, she blocked several close friends on her social media accounts, cutting off communication channels that had always been wide open. It was as though she was being forced to burn bridges in real time. On June 22nd, just days after Athena's arrival in Manila, her family and friends finally acted. They filed a police report and began pushing for answers. That same day, rumors spread that her parents had been contacted by kidnappers demanding payment. Within weeks, multiple outlets reported that the family had handed over 800,000 yuan, the equivalent of roughly 110,000 US dollars. Despite paying, Athena never came home. There was no proof that the money secured her safety, and no communication followed. It seemed the ransom had vanished into the same void that now swallowed Athena. The figure of Li became increasingly central to public suspicion. Why had she pushed Athena to make the trip only to cancel at the last minute? Why had she wiped her social media accounts the moment Athena disappeared? Later explanations she offered to reporters and acquaintances contradicted themselves, with shifting timelines and strange alibis. Some claimed she was in Hong Kong during the critical days. Others said her father told people she was in London. Still later, she suggested she had been in Japan. None of it matched, and the inconsistencies only deepened public anger. To many, Li was no longer just a friend who canceled plans. She was the person who had set Athena on a path that ended in abduction. The pressure intensified when Athena's usual online presence dissolved completely. WeChat moments that once carried near-daily posts went silent. Followers flooded her accounts with comments, questions, and desperate pleas, but none were answered. In the influencer world, such silence is like a death knell. The absence of updates was louder than any announcement could have been. It said that Athena was no longer in control of her life or of her image, or perhaps even her own safety. By late June, the whispers about what had happened to Athena transformed into a storm of rumors. Some claimed she was still in Manila, held against her will in a casino. Others insisted she had been trafficked onward to Cambodia. Every new thread online attracted thousands of views and comments. Hashtags with her name surged across platforms, but reliable information remained scarce. The only facts that held up under scrutiny were stark. A young influencer had boarded a plane to the Philippines on June 16th. She borrowed money under strange circumstances. She stopped responding to messages. A ransom was reportedly paid. And then, she was gone. The story that began as the rise of a glamorous social media star had turned into a nightmare of criminal intrigue, betrayal, and silence. The forces that swallowed Athena Liya were not random or accidental. They belonged to a darker world of organized networks operating across borders, a world that would soon be revealed as far larger and more brutal than anyone first imagined. By the end of that summer in 2023, Athena's disappearance was no longer just a whisper between friends and followers. It had become a national story, one that mixed fear, outrage, and an ever-expanding circle of rumor. Chinese social media platforms lit up with speculation, each theory darker than the last. In the middle of this storm, the Kaohsiung Chamber of Commerce was pulled into the spotlight. The chamber had a reputation for wielding influence in Southeast Asia, and had even been credited with rescuing Chinese nationals from scam compounds in Myanmar. As online pressure mounted, desperate netizens begged the chamber to intervene in Athena's case. For a brief moment, it seemed like salvation might be near. Reports surfaced in August that the chamber was in contact with her captors and that her release was imminent. Some media even quoted a representative suggesting Athena would be home within days. But those hopes were crushed almost immediately when Yang Jingwei, the supposed chamber official at the center of the claims, took to social media and declared he had never spoken to the press. He warned that reckless speculation could make the situation worse, even endanger Athena if she was still alive. In one breath, the sliver of optimism was gone, leaving only confusion. At nearly the same time, sharp-eyed observers noticed something unsettling. In mid-August, the Ningbo Police Department released an anti-fraud video, part of a nationwide campaign to warn citizens about overseas scams. Among the victim names shown briefly on screen was Kong Limei, Athena's real name. To some, this was confirmation that law enforcement viewed her case as tied directly to international fraud and trafficking. To others, it was a mistake or a cruel coincidence. The police never clarified, leaving the public to argue over whether Athena's name appearing in that clip was deliberate or an error. What it did show, however, was that her case had caught the attention of officials, even if they were unwilling or unable to say so publicly. September brought a new and far more disturbing twist. A Chinese blogger operating under the alias Bangkok Old White claimed Athena had been trafficked into Cambodia and forced into work at an elite Phnom Penh nightclub known as Asia No. 1. According to his story, this was no ordinary bar, but a playground for the wealthy and powerful, a place where hostesses were paraded like commodities and sold for staggering amounts. He alleged that Athena had been priced at $10,000 an hour, her notoriety and beauty making her a high-value prize for those who frequented the club. Screenshots of Telegram posts advertising her name began circulating, feeding the frenzy. Then a video emerged, grainy and violent, showing a woman being dragged by her hair toward a back entrance. The blogger insisted it was Athena. The resemblance was close enough to ignite outrage, but not clear enough to prove anything. Within days, Asia No. 1's social media accounts were deleted or banned, fueling belief that there was truth behind the claims. Soon after, the nightclub's manager allegedly responded to online inquiries by saying Athena had already died. That statement, too, remains unverified. Some stories claimed she was tortured to the point of irreversible damage before being discarded. Others said she was buried at sea. In the absence of proof, the speculation became more grotesque by the day. The rumors about Asia No. 1 could never be verified, but they exposed a deeper fear. If Athena really had been trafficked into Cambodia's underworld, she was not alone. In recent years, Cambodia, along with neighboring Myanmar, Laos, and the Philippines, had become hubs for sprawling scam compounds. These were not small gangs operating out of backrooms. They were massive fortified complexes run by powerful syndicates, many of them led by Chinese crime bosses. United Nations reports called them modern slavery camps. Thousands of young men and women from across Asia were lured with promises of jobs in technology, finance, or entertainment. When they arrived, their passports were confiscated, their phones taken, and they were forced to work in brutal conditions, often running online fraud schemes that targeted victims worldwide. Those who resisted were beaten, starved, or sold to other syndicates. The profits were astronomical, estimated in the tens of billions of dollars each year. What had once been seen as isolated kidnappings was now recognized as a regional humanitarian emergency. And Athena, a public figure with thousands of followers, had become the most high-profile face of this hidden industry. By late 2024, another twist reignited public attention. Photos and videos leaked from Sihanoukville, Cambodia, one of the region's most notorious hubs for trafficking and fraud. They showed young women lined up inside the glittering halls of Jinbei Casino, each wearing a gown and a numbered badge pinned to her waist. In one shot, a woman in a pink dress, labeled number 66, stood with her hands clasped below her chest. Observers immediately claimed she looked exactly like Athena. Visitors to the casino even went online to say they had seen her with their own eyes. The resemblance was striking, and the story spread quickly across Chinese and Southeast Asian media. The possibility that she was alive, even if trapped, gave her followers a mix of hope and horror. The casino sighting soon became the most widely discussed lead in the case. Yet, just like the nightclub rumors before it, nothing was confirmed. Authorities never issued statements verifying her identity. Journalists who tried to follow the trail hit walls of silence. Some theorized that if it was her, she may have been subjected to forced drug use, cosmetic alteration, or psychological manipulation to keep her compliant. Others claimed it was simply another woman who bore a resemblance. Without direct evidence, the casino videos joined the growing pile of ambiguous clues that kept Athena's story suspended between fact and fiction. Amid all this, the figure of her former friend Lee continued to cast a long shadow. Investigations by online sleuths dug into her past, portraying her as a young woman from Wuhan who had cultivated an image of wealth and sophistication. She was said to have studied in London and moved through social circles in Shenzhen, where flaunting luxury was a way of life. Rumors swirled that she and her mother had long acted as intermediaries, connecting young women with nightlife venues or wealthy clients under the guise of friendship. Whether any of this was true remains unclear, but the timing of her actions, canceling the trip, erasing her online presence, and then resurfacing with contradictory stories, made her a convenient villain in the narrative. In the eyes of many, she was the one who had delivered Athena to the traffickers. As more stories piled up, the boundaries between fact and rumor blurred almost completely. Each new piece of gossip, whether a nightclub death, a casino sighting, or a whispered rescue attempt, added to the growing mythology around Athena's disappearance. Yet, at the core, the verified information remained painfully thin. She had boarded a flight to Manila. She had borrowed money under suspicious circumstances. A ransom had been paid, and then she vanished. Everything after that, from the Cambodian nightclubs to the numbered gowns of the casinos, lived in the shadows of speculation. What made the case all the more haunting was how perfectly it fit into the wider crisis consuming Southeast Asia. Across Myanmar's border towns like Shwe Kako and Mayawati, and in Cambodia's Sihanoukville, vast scam zones operated with near impunity. Victims were not just poor job seekers, but also students, professionals, and increasingly influencers with international reach. Syndicates knew that a pretty face with a following could be monetized in more ways than one, either through forced hostessing, prostitution, or by using their accounts to lure other victims. It was a chilling business model, one that blurred human trafficking with digital crime on a massive scale. Athena's disappearance was no longer just the tragedy of one woman. It had become a symbol of a regional nightmare that governments struggled to contain. As the months dragged on, Athena's name never faded from the headlines or from the feverish discussions online. For her followers, the hope that she might still be alive clashed constantly with the horror of what she might be enduring. Every rumor of her death was met with disbelief. Every alleged sighting was grasped like a lifeline. The reality was that nobody knew for certain. She existed in a cruel limbo, both present and absent, alive and gone, her image circulating endlessly even as her body remained lost. By the time the world turned its eyes to 2025, her story was already cemented as one of the most infamous unsolved cases of influencer culture colliding with international crime. And the darkness surrounding her fate was about to grow even deeper. As 2025 began, the case of Athena Liya remained unsolved, but events unfolding elsewhere shone a light on how her disappearance may have fit into a much larger machinery of crime. In early January, Chinese actor Wang Xing, known for minor roles in films and television, became the center of a chillingly similar story. He received what looked like a legitimate casting offer from a company tied to the Thai entertainment industry. The opportunity promised steady work and recognition, and like so many before him, he believed it was real. He flew to Bangkok, was picked up at the airport, and then disappeared without a trace. Days later, reports confirmed he had been trafficked across the Thai border into Myanmar. Wang's testimony after his rescue was like a blueprint for everything people feared had happened to Athena. He described being taken to Apollo Park, a scam compound with 3 distinct areas: a holding block for new arrivals, a training facility where abducted victims were forced to learn online fraud, and a working floor where scams were carried out against targets around the world. He was stripped of his belongings, had his head shaved, and was told that from that moment forward, he was no longer free. What saved him was the storm that erupted online. His girlfriend's public appeals gained the attention of celebrities, and within days, pressure mounted on Thai officials. The Prime Minister acknowledged his case, and Thai and Myanmar authorities, along with militia groups, negotiated his release. He returned home visibly shaken, proof of what these syndicates were capable of. The rescue did more than save one man. It exposed the networks operating along the Thai-Myanmar border, forcing authorities to crack down. Power supplies and internet lines feeding major compounds were cut. Thousands of victims were identified and slated for deportation. At least a dozen traffickers were arrested, and Chinese suspects were extradited back to face trial. The raids uncovered more than 1,500 potential victims trapped in similar conditions. The case proved beyond doubt that these compounds were real, that they operated on a massive scale, and that anyone could fall victim. The eerie parallels to Athena's disappearance were impossible to ignore. For investigators and the public following Athena's story, Wang Xing's ordeal showed how quickly a dream job could turn into captivity, and how international borders made rescues almost impossible. While Wang had the benefit of timing, attention, and high-profile allies, Athena had disappeared 18 months earlier without the same immediate spotlight. The fear was that she had been pulled into the same machinery, but lacked the chance to be saved before being erased into anonymity. Meanwhile, stories surrounding her continued to evolve, growing murkier by the month. Some sources claimed that the Kaohsiung Chamber of Commerce had secretly succeeded in bringing her back to China in late 2024, moving her quietly into medical care to recover from years of abuse. There were whispers that she had given birth while in captivity, the child allegedly fathered by a figure within the syndicate. These claims spread like wildfire across forums and messaging groups, but were never substantiated by any official statement. For many, the silence of her family was proof that something had happened, but others pointed out that silence was also the hallmark of rumor. By mid-2025, her online footprint provided no clarity either. Her social media profiles listed Guangdong as her location, but that information could be manually entered and did not prove physical presence. No new posts surfaced. She did not re-emerge in public. For someone whose life had been built on visibility, the void was haunting. If she had been rescued, her absence from the online world suggested either a desire for complete privacy or an inability to return. If she had not been rescued, the accounts served as ghostly reminders of a life once vibrant and now suspended. The truth is that Southeast Asia's trafficking empire thrives on this kind of ambiguity. Victims are moved from one compound to another, sold between groups like property, hidden behind layers of intermediaries. A person can disappear into these systems for years, resurfacing only when authorities stumble upon them during raids. Even then, many are never identified, deported under false names, or too afraid to reveal their true stories. Athena's fame made her case exceptional in visibility, but in practice, she was just one of countless victims swallowed by the machine. What makes her story especially haunting is the scale of the criminal economy behind it. United Nations reports in 2025 estimated hundreds of thousands trapped in cyber scam centers across Myanmar, Cambodia, and Laos. The profits, driven by online fraud and human exploitation, reached billions. These operations were protected not just by gangs, but also by local corruption, militias, and weak governments unable or unwilling to enforce the law. For every victim like Wang Xing who was pulled out, thousands more remained behind fences, under watch, their identities erased. The chilling thought is that Athena may have been one of them all along, shuffled between compounds, forced into roles that stripped away her identity until she was unrecognizable. The rumors of her death, particularly those tied to the Asia #1 nightclub, still linger in the shadows of her case. To this day, no proof has ever surfaced. The video of a woman being dragged by her hair remains one of the most hotly debated pieces of evidence. Was it her? Was it another victim? The lack of clarity feeds the myth, making her disappearance a story that refuses to close. As of August 30th, 2025, Athena Liya remains missing, her fate unknown. She has become a symbol of both the promise and the peril of influencer culture, colliding with the darkest edges of organized crime. Her rise from beauty pageants to social media stardom showed how quickly fame can be built. Her fall into silence showed how quickly it can all be taken away. Every thread of her story leads to dead ends. Every rumor contradicts the last, and every glimmer of hope is matched by despair. The criminal underworld that likely ensnared her still thrives across Southeast Asia, and until there is confirmation, Athena exists in limbo. Alive or gone, free or captive, rescued or erased, her story is unfinished. And that is perhaps the most frightening part. 2 years on, the mystery of Athena Liya remains unsolved. She may still be alive, trapped inside syndicates that operate beyond the reach of law. Or she may have met a fate too dark to imagine. What's certain is that her case is no isolated tragedy. It is a chilling window into a criminal empire that thrives on silence and shadows. Until the truth is revealed, Athena's story will continue to haunt those who followed her rise and mourn her fall. For more stories that peel back the curtain on hidden worlds, make sure you subscribe and never miss an update.